Question of the day, what is your favorite app-driven game? Now hear me out, before we get too far, normally when I talk about app-driven games, we're talking about some sort of Ameritrash game which you're running around killing enemies and rolling dice and seeing how the enemy plays. But today we're talking about a very different app-driven game. Today we're talking about My Father's Work from Renegade Games. This is a Euro game, a worker placement game that is app-driven. Now when I say app-driven, most of the game happens on the game board like you would expect a Euro 2, a worker placement to. However, there are tweaks and twists that happen in the app that the app elevates. So we're going to talk about how it plays, what it does. Now look, before I go any further, I'm going to give you a brief overview because I wouldn't call it a spoiler, but some on the internet would call it a spoiler. So I can't show you anything of an actual scenario. There are 3 scenarios, but as I'm about to say in the how to play part, those scenarios have so many branching paths where you could play the same scenario 8 times and have a completely different experience. So technically you could say there's 16 to 24 different scenarios in the box, or maybe even more because I don't know the permutation count, but there's a lot of variability. So when you see 3 scenarios at first, don't be disheartened and go, ugh, there's only 3 scenarios, we can only play this. It's much more varied than that. So here's how you play, a brief overview that shows you the components of the game, a rough idea how to play, and then we'll come back up, talk final thoughts right now. All right, so this is My Father's Work unboxed. Now, I should say, I left it in the game trays for a minute because I just want you to see how nice this game trays is. And a couple of other things, how nice they are. So, in the actual characters that you're going to use, you're going to pick whichever one you want to represent you, and then your spouse, as well as your minions. So, they put a wonderful wash on this so you can see just the amazing detail of these miniatures. It reminds me of Mansions of Madness. In fact, the motif of this game is it feels like Mansions of Euro games. A couple other things I want to show you because I can't show you a ton of this game because it's got a lot of spoilers involved. So we have the components right here. Now you've got these acrylic tokens here which have the screen prints on them. These are bodies, which is hilarious. The animals are all different. The bottles for one of the ingredients are little glass bottles with corks in them. Metal coins here that are fantastic, as well as these metal cogs, wheels, gears, and the cubes are going to be used for placing your player color out there. Just amazing components. So I really want to show you that because I can't show you a ton else. Now, the characters, you'll have your own color here. You'll match it based on that. Then you have these awesome little tokens here that are all different based on player color. And you have a player board. I'm going to show you the player board first here. You're going to place your buildings that you build during the game on these spaces. Notice some of them have extra cost associated with them. I'll show you that on the main board. Also here is where you're going to study, or you're going to record knowledge. So you're going to have your tokens here, one on each color there. And then as you record knowledge and move these up, you get benefits during the game, but you also have to pay 1 resource, 2 resources, or 3 resources of this color. So this would be black, yellow, green, and blue to move up. So there's resources there that I showed you, those cubes, that's what those are. There are action spaces here in your manor, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then certain things will happen based on these buildings. I'll show you a couple of those that will change up your manor. But again, the manor spaces also show you who can take an action without penalty. And right here it shows you what actions can be taken by what bases. Now, the bases of the characters are all the same before you put your plastic rings around them. Once you put your plastic ring around them, this might become your pentagon, it might become your square, it might become your circle. That's a nice little bit of flexibility. But for instance, your hexagon here, there's no pentagon. Yeah, there are pentagons, right? No, there's not. Your hexagon, this can take a town and it takes a +2 bonus. So think the Grande worker in viticulture, but also it gets a +2 and it doesn't have to pay the fee if you take an action that someone's already in. Normally you would pay a coin to that person. The estate action, so that'd be ones done here in the state, can only be taken, or they can be taken by anybody, but the square bases can only take estate actions unless you have a building that lets you change that. And then your circle workers, and the circle with your spouse is going to be a circle worker with knots on it here. See that one? That's going to be town actions only. Now those can be taken by your main character as well, but the town actions are going to be based on the book. Now you're going to set this up in a puzzle piece here, and again I can't really show you. I'm going to try to show you just the first page, but you'll set this up. It's got the tokens, the markers for your creepy amount, the markers for the townsfolk uproar amount, the generation count, the middle, early, and late, and then as well as tokens to put the buildings on. Now the buildings are going to be things like this. They're going to be things that say like gain an additional $1 at the start of each round. So normally you're going to gain $3 at the start of each round. This one costs you 2, plus if it costs anything extra in that space. Also, when you play it, and every generation, you're going to gain a creepy. So essentially, a creepy is a bad resource count or a bad count that's going to move you up that board. And if your creepy ever passes the townsfolk torch, you can only take the church action, which will allow you to remove creepy, or take the town hall action, which is going to allow you to remove riot. So I'm going to show you page 2. Now again, before we go any further, again, I can't show you a ton about this game because even though it is a Euro game, worker placement, a couple more cards in here. You have some experiment cards. You're going to build this grand experiment card, which are really great. So you got the creature, the nyctalope, the lycanthrope strength, immortality, the time machine, the giant spider chariot, and there's teleportation as well as a love potion. These are just tremendous art on the back, but it shows you how you build it. You have to have 1A, 2 Bs, 3 Cs built, as well as these resources to build this particular thing. When you do, it's worth 22 victory points, or varied based on what it does. Some will give you abilities, some will give you creepy, some will give you other things, as well as sanity. Now there are these cards over here, which we're going to give you a quick bonus, but if you have too many of these left over, they're points at the end of the game. If you have too many of these unfulfilled, you're going to gain one of these malady cards, which these are going to be malediction, malady cards. We're going to give you problems that you're going to have to deal with during the game. Now the game is played over 3 generations, which means you're technically playing someone's self, their grandson, their great-grandson, or granddaughter, or whatever. But there's 3 modules, I would call them. So this is the cost of disease. Then there's the fear of the unknown and a time of war. Now, just because there's 3 in this box, do not think that there are only 3 times you can play this and you're done. There are so many different paths in each of these that when you play them, based on your choices, it will change what you do. Now, there's an app involved as well. So I'm going to show you the map here on page 2, because I believe that's where we're going to start normally in the time of war, or the cost of disease. These are the action spaces here. Now, if they have a cost, it will show it. For instance, this one gives you a creepy, but you gain a resource of an occult here. This one gives you a body, but it gives you 2 of those things. You get a creepy and the riot moves up. This one backs up the riot. This one, the church, if you pay 0, you move down 1 on your creepy. 1, you move down 2. 2, you move down 3. All of this will change. Notice how many pages there are here. There are 3 modules, but there's a whole lot of pages of town that will change based on the decisions you make. For instance, in the cost of disease, you might choose to be more scientifically based as opposed to kind of fear-based, or what's the word? Superstition based, and that will change the entire narrative to where you may end up with a very Bloodborne style mission. Trust me, definitely some Bloodborne references. Or you may end up with a much more scientific method in which there's all sorts of hospitals and things being built. Now you also have these experiments here in the game. Those action spaces are going to allow you to, on your estate, build these experiments. Now there's A's, there's B's, there's C's. You're going to draw these throughout the game. The A ones are always pretty much going to give you knowledge cubes. Now occult can always be spent as a knowledge cube when building these if you need it. But when you're doing that gain knowledge action, like I showed you on the manor board, you have to use that type, which means you can't use occult for blue on the manor board or the estate board. It has to be used as an occult. So you're going to gain the cubes here. That's mostly what the A's do. B's are going to give you other benefits, but the point is you have to have them in a bit of a tech tree. So in order to build a B, you have to have an A. However, in order to build a C, you have to have 2 B's, which means you're going to have 1A, 1B, 2 B's, and then a C. And these are all going to give you benefits down here. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, but they are going to give you victory points. And depending on when you build a C, if it's the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd generation, you're going to get more points or less. Now, the game is played over 3 generations. The app drives most of this. I would show you some of the app, but I don't want to spoil any of it because it's going to give you, think Mansions of Madness. Think it's going to ask you questions. It'll say, are you this player, do this thing. Do you want to explore this moment? And if you say, yes, I want to explore, it's going to give you these consequences for exploring. But most of the game is a worker placement game, which you're getting the resources that we mentioned here before, whether it be animals or bottles or cogs, and you're using those resources to build these experiments, which are going to give you knowledge. And then the thing about the knowledge is on your estate board, once you move up these tracks on gain knowledge, you're going to count as having each of the cubes that you're on. So if I move up on my blue, I now have a permanent blue cube, kind of like Splendor. That is how the game works. It is a worker placement game in which you're using the app to play Mansions of Madness style. If this thing happens, or are you this character, or do you want to explore this space at this area? There are ways you can lose workers. There's ways you can gain more workers. It is a very, very detailed game. And again, I can't show you too much about it because no, it's not a spoiler, and no, it's not a campaign game. We could play the game exactly 2 times in a row, making almost the exact same decisions. And because it's Euro-based, it's still not going to be game-breaking to where you go, oh, I know this is going to happen. Yes, some things will be mitigated by that, but sometimes there are so many choices and flows that you may make this choice in Generation 1, but make this choice in Generation 2, which is going to completely branch how Generation 3 plays. So that's how you play My Father's Work. A quick overview. Again, you're going to need to play the game to understand fully what I mean by the app, because I don't want to spoil it, but that is My Father's Work, a very, very detailed, but not overly heavy Euro game. Again, I'll say it again, mansions of Euro worker placement. So that's My Father's Work. Now, first and foremost, we always do art, then art direction, then the verdict of the gameplay. Number one, the art in this game is tremendous. It is a fantastic looking game. It's beautiful. I love the way this game looks, right? Every bit of it just drips money. It just looks good, from the art on the cards, the art on the final cards that you're trying to build, the components themselves, the game trays themselves, the board itself, the fact that the map changes based on what you choose to do is so good. Now, as far as art direction, the symbols are easy. As in any good Euro game, you need symbols that make sense and tell you what to do when you take an action, or what you have to pay when you take an action. This excels at that. There are very few times, maybe your first time playing, you have to kind of flip through and see a couple rules, but there are very few times where you go, what does that symbol even mean? Once you've got it down, you are good to go on this game. So art and art direction are a 10 out of 10 for me. It is so superbly done. Now, when it comes to the gameplay, let's talk about the game outside of the app. The game outside of the app is a straightforward worker placement game in which you have 2 boards. You have the town board and then your estate board. I love the fact that certain actions can be taken on the town and then certain ones can be taken on the board, and you can take these actions on the town and they're better if you use this person, but if you use this person in the estate, you might lose them. That little wrinkle and twist is such a perfect twist on the game. Now, if that was all the game was, it would still be a great game, as MJF would say. However, because the app and scenarios are involved, this is an excellent game. It is a tremendous game. It's one of my favorite worker placement games because the app takes what I love about Mansions of Madness, the variability, the if this player is doing this, or if you're this player, or isn't that a weird thing happening at the warehouse? Would you like to check it out? It takes all of that and incorporates it into the game. But not only that, the app is a reminder of what to do every round. It tells you what to do. It tells you what you can do. It tells you any special rules that are broken that you can play. It's just a tremendous game. Now, I love this game. It is one of my favorite games I've played in a long time. It is a beautiful game. It's a very well played game. It is such a well made game that I think if you like Euro games, you're going to love this. But hear me out. If you like Ameritrash games like Mansions of Madness and Arkham Horror, you're going to love this game. It is such a perfect mix of the two. It's like a Reese's peanut butter cup. It's perfect chocolate, perfect peanut butter mixed into two. It is so good. Now, I love the game, love how it plays. There's this weird thing in the rulebook that got some attention. I wish people would handle that more in a blog so that they can expand on their thoughts and maybe even have some feedback more so than the rulebook, but I don't really care because it's the back page of the rulebook. If you're the type of person that gets irritated by that, either left, right, or center, you can just ignore it. I will say that kind of thing I wish would be handled again in more of a blog so the writer can say, here's exactly what I mean by this. And oh, well, yeah, maybe that's a good point, and vice versa. Again, I get it. It's the artist, it's the designer's game. I understand that, but I'm not sure the rule book is the best place for those kind of commentary on a game that you very heavily leaned into and made. Not a critique of the game. The game is actually a 9 out of 10 for me. It is a wonderful, wonderful game. My Father's Work is a phenomenal game. If you like Euros, 100% get this game. If you like dark, scary horror themes, this one also has enough light notes in it where you can play it and be enjoying it as well. Just a knock out of the park. My Father's Work, 9 out of 10 from me, Bryan Drake, here on the Dice Tower from Renegade Games. Now make sure you follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Dice Tower Bryan, but also this Thursday, October 20th, the Dice Tower merch store opens. Get your hats, get your shirts, get all of your stuff. We cannot wait. We're so excited for you to be able to do the two things you've asked about. How can we get merch and how can we support the Dice Tower during the year? This is the #1 way to do that. Love that this is happening. October 20th, Thursday, this coming Thursday. Come check out the Dice Tower store at dicetowerstore.com. Until then, we'll see you.